It's officially Masters Week, where golf's best of the best contend for the sport's coveted prize, the green jacket, at Augusta National, and we're super lucky to be joined by the 2014 low amateur at the Masters and Australian golf professional Ollie Goss for an in-depth analysis of the 9 holes that make or break a Masters contender. Thanks for joining us, Ollie. First of all, talk to us about what's going through the golfer's mind, walking up Magnolia Lane, about to play the Masters tournament. What's going through your brain?
Walking up Magnolia Lane or driving up there was super exciting, and I just couldn't wait to get out there and get started. So my whole mentality before that week was just to try and take it all in and really absorb what I was doing and what I'd achieved, and engage with the crowd a little bit and not just solely focus on my score. So and I'm lucky that I did that, because I can remember so much of every single day and the entire week. Got to spend with my family, so I can recall that for the rest of my life. And I'm really lucky.
Given there's such a long build up through the week before you actually walk onto that first tee for the first time, is it easy to sort of play out the round in your mind before walking onto the tee, or what are you thinking strategically going into that round?
I mean, if you haven't got a game plan before you walk off onto the first tee, you've got absolutely no chance. Like, to be honest, what are you even doing there? I was able to go down a few times in the months leading up to it and really prepare. So even before I got there that week, I knew what I was going to be doing. I had a local caddy, and he told me that it took him about 10 years to truly learn the greens and really nail it. So for me, only getting 5 rounds beforehand, he was really important to have on the bag.
We've picked out 9 holes that you think can be make or break if you're going to win a Masters tournament, starting with the first hole. Talk to us about the first hole. It's a par 4, 445 yard. Can you go through the hole firstly and what it looks like from the first tee?
It looks amazing from the first tee. You kind of hit up back onto a plateau, so you're hitting up the hill. And disregarding the probably 5,000 people that are standing around the first tee, the hole's beautiful. I mean, if you're hitting up this little plateau, there's a fairway bunker on the right, which you really think you don't want to go into, but it's not a bad miss. So ideally, I'd be hitting a little fade with driver just left of the bunker and having a short iron into a really tricky green. It's one that I was just going to play middle of the green and putt to the corners, because all the flags are usually in the 4 corners on that hole. So the game plan was to hit a short iron to the middle of the green and putt to the corners. Off the tee, missing it right is an absolute no-go. You really don't want to be right of the fairway bunker. Left isn't a bad option if you're really far left, which is what I did. And I snap hooked it off the tee every day and was in the middle of the 9th fairway, and it really wasn't a bad shot to hit over the trees, but a very tricky tee shot straight up. And the green's super tricky as well, just because of the different grains and things. So if you miss that green, it's a really tricky up and down to any flag.
The 6th hole, a par 3, 180 yard hole. Talk to us about the par 3s at Augusta. They're super challenging. Obviously, the 6 is, would you say, one of the most challenging on the course?
I think so, for sure, because it's severely downhill. Like, it's a good 20-30 meters down the hill, so you've got to allow for that. And there's some really big trees that cover the left side of the hole, so it's really difficult to calculate the wind because the trees kind of block it, and you're really not sure which way the wind is going. And there's obviously a really severe tier to the back right, and I think you've only got maybe a dining table to land on if you want to keep it on that top tier. Otherwise, it's either going over the back, kicking off to the right, or spinning back down the tier, and you've now got 50-footers, a 50-foot putt up a 6-foot tier. So very tricky shot. If you miss it long, that's a scary chip back down the hill to the top flag. There's a very good chance it's going to run off the back and even off to the right of the green. It's just a very scary shot in general, because you've got such a small area to land it on, and the green is very slopey.
Do you find in the round that your club selection ever alters based on wind exposure on that hole?
Oh, for sure. And you've really got to understand how the wind works around the trees, because in some areas of the course it's fairly open. but I think they also have left a lot of the trees quite dense so that the wind actually funnels through the trees and really messes with your head, and you think it might be blowing one direction and it could be the complete opposite direction, just because of the way it's flowing through the trees. But once you get that ball up above the trees, you could have completely miscalculated it and it's going the complete opposite direction where you want to.
After playing that par 3 6th, you then walk on to the 7th, another hole you think is super important to your round. That's a par 4, 450-yard hole. Talk to us about the 7th hole.
I think the 7th hole is underrated on how difficult that hole is. You know, it doesn't sound that intimidating. You know, it's a shortish par 4. You know, you can get a good drive away and have a wedge or just a short iron in. But the tricky part is that the fairway slopes heavily left to right, and the trees on the left come in quite quickly. So it's quite hard to start at left and play a fade, and then it's going to bounce off into the right rough quite quickly. And probably at about 250, 260 meters, the fairway gets significantly narrower, and you've probably only got a 10-meter fairway to hit it between, which at 300 meters is very, very tight, especially with the slope of the fairway. So if you can get one in the fairway there, you're hitting off a severely sloped lie to a green that in one area is quite easy, but on another area is quite difficult. So the left side of the green slopes heavily away. Then in the middle, there's kind of this plateau, which is quite small. You have a very, very small landing area, especially if you're coming in with a longer club. And on the right side of the green, it all slopes down to that front right pin that we all know. You can see guys commonly feeding the ball back into tap in length from all over the place. So it's a very, very tricky hole, and your game plan changes like that depending on where you hit it. So you've got to have a few options there. You can't just have the one game plan. You've got to be able to have a few options depending on the wind and where you hit it if you want to be successful.
Are you prepared for all the different pin placements through the weekend? Like, do you get a chance to practice with different pin positions in your practice rounds and things like that to prepare?
You have to, otherwise you're not going to have a good week. So it's not too difficult to find out where they usually put the pins. I mean, you can get old pin sheets. A lot of the caddies know where all the pins are anyway. So you kind of know where the pins are going to be, and you do your practice to all 4 pins from all different areas, just so you can be most prepared.
The next hole, the 11th, which is the start of the famed Amen Corner at the Masters. We all know, it's such an iconic part of the course. It starts at the 11th hole, which is a par 4, 505-yard hole. Talk to us about the 11th and what makes it so daunting.
For me, one of the most difficult holes during the week, mainly because it's a long hole. It's a really tricky second shot, and the week I played it, it was into the wind every single day. And as I said, I was one of the longer hitters, and I would get a good drive away and still have a 4-iron into a par 4 that has an insanely tricky green. So I was just watching the telecast this morning, and I hear that they've actually lengthened it by 20 meters or so and made the right side, just to the right of the green, even more difficult. So that hole could play significantly over par this week, depending on the wind. I mean, you might see guys going in with fairway woods all the time, and you've got to somehow not hit it in the water, not miss it to the right, hit it on this green that is at about a 45-degree angle, and try and get it in the hole. It just sounds absolutely impossible. So off that tee, you're looking to hit a little fade just to go with the shape of the fairway. Really can't miss it left. If you miss it left, you're going to lose your golf ball. Miss it right, you're going to chip out. At least you can find it. You're probably not going to have a shot towards the green, because if you do, there's a very good chance that it could kick off one of the mounds and actually go in the water. So you're probably looking to chip out sideways or even chip out to the right of the green, which they've just made more difficult, so that might not be an option anymore. So hitting that second shot into that green, it's a tiny landing area. I mean, you've got to avoid the water on the left, avoid the miss on the right, not hit it in the back right bunker, and you've just honestly just got to step up and man up and hit a really good shot. There's just no other way about it.
The next hole, the 12th, we all know the 12th, it's a par 3. Bunkers both front and back, and then also the creek in front of the green. Talk to us about what sort of shot you're playing there.
12, obviously one of the most iconic holes on the course, and I think the reason why it's so difficult for a lot of players is the wind and the way that the trees are shaped around the back of the green. So the trees around the back, there's also some trees on the left, so it can really mess with the wind. And I kind of played that. I split the green up into two sections, left and right, and I was just playing to the middle of the left section, middle of the right section. Got a really good gauge on the wind. So commonly it could feel into the wind, but it was actually off the right, or vice versa. And that's what makes it difficult and why people miss it to the right all the time. Is they try and fade it up into what they think is a right to left wind, but it's actually into. And that's why it commonly gets caught up in Rays Creek and comes back down the hill. But yeah, very, very tricky hole. I mean, even if it's like a pitching wedge to the front, maybe a 9-iron to a back pin. So it doesn't seem like that intimidating, but it's a very, very tricky hole.
And then the 13th, which is that par 5 with the creek running down the left side of the fairway, dog left. Some of the most famous shots in Masters history have been played on this hole. Describe the 13th hole for us.
Yeah, another iconic hole. You got Rays Creek there. If you can get a good drive away, it's a huge scoring opportunity. It's probably one of the holes that you are actually thinking about making birdie. But yeah, the tee shot is really, really difficult. I mean, if you hit driver straight, you're going to hit it into the trees. So you've kind of either got to shape it right to left around the trees and around the water and get it running down the left side, or if you're long enough, you can actually now go straight over the corner. You couldn't a few years ago. You know, the year I played, there was a huge ice storm in I think a month or two beforehand, and they lost a lot of the trees there. So previously you weren't able to really go over the corner because it was too densely filled with trees, but now you can.
And the 15th, 530-yard par 5, another par 5. I've heard you say before, this is one of the more challenging and daunting par 5s on the course, potentially the most scary.
The 15th is easily the scariest sand wedge or pitch shot you'll ever come across, especially to that left pin. So they've also just added about 20 meters to this hole this year, which is going to bring that water more into play. You know, even for the longer hitters, you are still hitting long irons in, but now I think they're going to be, you know, taking the head covers off sometimes if they want to go for it. So the tee shot is quite tough. You've got about half a fairway to hit it in, because if you hit it too far left, there's some trees on the left there, which you might remember Bubba trying to hook it around. So you've really got to hit the right side of the fairway if you want a clear shot at the green. And you're hitting a shot that's probably 15-20 meters down the hill over water and trying to stop it on this little piece of grass at the end there. And especially if you hit it long, there's a really good chance it can actually bounce in the water that backs onto the 16th hole. So if you go for it, there's a real risk reward element now that they've lengthened it. But I'm kind of glad they have. I think it'll make it more exciting, especially with how far everyone's hitting it now. I think it'll bring that hole back into play. If you are laying up, you really want to lay up on the left side of the fairway because of the grain of the green. So the grain of the green kind of slopes northeast to southwest. Almost like a 45-degree angle if you're in the middle of the fairway. So hitting the ball on the left side, you hit it kind of pitching back straight into the grain. Whereas if you're on the right side, it's essentially going to spin hard to the left and bring that water into play. So that left pin, you've probably got a dinner plate to land it on. I mean, if you're short, it's going to spin back in the water. If you're long, it's going to bounce over the back. And now you've got a really tricky chip back down the hill towards the water. So that's what makes that pitch shot or that third shot so scary is, you know, you're hitting off a really tight lie and you've got the tiniest little area to land it in. And yeah, it just makes it so hard.
16th, which is the par 3, we've seen some amazing battles over the years on this hole. It's 170 yards off the tee. Talk to us about the par 3 16th.
Yeah, another really iconic hole. As you said, it's the hole that Tiger chipped in on. And to be honest, it wasn't really that hard of a chip. But given the scenario and the situation, that's what makes it so impressive. So very, very undulating green. I mean, there's 2 tiers, right and left, which you don't see too often. But if you've got one of the left pins, you can just hit it 10, 15 foot right of the flag, and it's going to roll down towards the hole. But that back left pin, if there was no one there was no tournament, it'd be what I would call, a hole-in-one flag. It's where everyone is trying to get it in the hole. If you miss it in the bunker, you can hit it up on the slope, it's going to come back. If you hit it where Tiger hit it, you can use the slope. Probably the only place you don't want to miss it is actually right on the green, and putting back down that slope is really, really tricky. But again, the trees do a world of damage in terms of figuring out where the wind is, so the tee shot can be quite tough.
And finally, the 18th hole, another hole we've seen some incredible Masters moments played out over the years. A dogleg right off the tee. It's a par 4 uphill. Talk to us about the final hole on the course.
18 is probably one of the most demanding tee shots in golf. They lengthened that hole by a good 40, 50 yards in the early 2000s, and it made that shoot between the trees that much more narrow. And I think it shows up in all the pictures quite well. And in person, it seems even narrower, especially when you're standing on that tee and you're on the verge of making the cut or trying to have a good finish. It makes it even more tricky. So you're basically trying to hit it at that fairway bunker you can see in the distance with a little fade. You've got to be careful though. If you block it at all, there's some trees that come in quickly on the right, so you could be chipping out fairly quickly. But if you get a good drive away, it's really, really important. For the longer hitters, you're only going to have a short iron in, maybe an 8 or a 9 iron, depending on where the flag is. Second shot's really, really tricky because you're hitting back up the hill a good 15, 20 meters to a really tiered green. As everyone knows, that front left flag, you can use the slope to get the ball back towards the hole. The back pins are probably the trickier pin because, you catch the tier and it's coming all the way back down the front. You hit it long and you've got a really tricky chip back down the hill. So if you are on the back tier putting down to one of the front pins, there's actually a sprinkler just on the fringe. If you're looking at the green from the fairway, it'd be on the right, near the right bunker. You putt at that sprinkler and it's going to go right down near the hole. It's one of the tricks that my caddy taught me. He said if the pin's ever at the bottom, you're on top, just putt it towards the sprinkler and it's going to go pretty close. There's no way you could go straight at the pin because the greens are too quick. It would actually roll off the front of the green. So yeah, it's a very, very tricky green, just a very tricky hole in general, especially when you consider the added pressure of it being the last hole of the tournament and all the people around and the significance of that. So yeah, another really, really iconic hole.